Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us for the Q&A of The Boys Who Said No. I'm so excited to have some of the cast and crew and everyone just here to kind of talk about the inspiration behind the movie and making it and just your involvement in the movie itself. So we're really excited to talk to you guys. I do just want to thank our major sponsors as well as the sponsor for this film, Pacific Eye Surgeon. So thank you to all of our sponsors. And then I also want to remind everyone watching to rate the film after you are done watching it. Rate all the movies. It's going to help us determine our audience award at the end of the festival. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Judith. She's the director and co-producer of this film. And I just kind of want you to maybe introduce yourself, introduce who's on this Q&A today, and maybe just talk a little bit, get us started.
Okay, great. Thanthis, Grace. Thanks for inviting us all. Well, I'm really excited to see everybody. It was kind of an excuse to get to see everybody. And this film was really made in a very unusual way. It was, let me just introduce everybody first. So the people who, David Harris, you will see a lot of in the film. He's here in the, I was going to say it's in the lower left corner. Winter Dellenbach also in the film. Winter and Bob Zhao were both part of the LA resistance, and Bob Cooney and Steve and David were all in Northern California during, no, wait a minute, Bob Cooney, you were in, yeah, all, and they were all in Palo Alto area, and Steve was in Berkeley, the other two Palo Alto, and
the rest of the country.
And the rest of the country. So this is just Californians. I sort of was thinking San Luis Obispo, all of you probably would have gone to the festival if it had been real this year, because you're some are in LA, some are in California, and it would have been just, it's a nice drive to SLO to San Luis Obispo. So I just felt like get the Californians together and tell their story. So, and these guys weren't just in the film. They did a lot to get the film made. So Bob Cooney and Steve Ladd were part of a committee that were, you know, met at least monthly to work on the film with me, and were very important to getting the film made and funded and all of that. So, but they really helped with the details and making sure we had all the facts straight, which is something I've always been a bit obsessed with. So, so just backtrack 1 second, David Harris was the co-founder of the Resistance, which is the subject of this film, which started as a local group and turned into a national organization that stopped the draft and helped to end the war. Everybody else were critical people in that movement and part of the film. So I kind of want to hand it over to everybody to just sort of tell a little about the history of the movement. And is there something that you think is most critical to giving a background for the story that'll help the audience understand the importance of this movement and the you know, how it links to the current moment, which I think is what's so exciting about releasing the film right now.
To understand this film, you have to start from the point that this war we are talking about was wrong with a capital W, not just wrong as in mistake, but wrong as in evil, of such an extent that it required any citizen or any human being to respond and try and stop it. And we did that response. And we sacrificed years of our lives, hoping to thereby slow down the war machine, and we were successful.
It was very interesting being a woman with Los Angeles Resistance, because I want to distinguish very clearly that men who turned in their draft cards, who didn't register with the draft, who would not carry a draft card, who went on trial, went to prison, although many of them who did all of those things actually didn't go to prison, and that was very fortunate, but they put themselves in great jeopardy. I didn't feel like I was going to be in that kind of jeopardy, but it was also very interesting that the Resistor sisters, who really became organizers, did put themselves into great jeopardy, but not to the degree that these men did. And when David, when you were just talking, I just teared up, and I was right back there. And when you say that this war was evil and that this war was wrong, it was so evil and it was so wrong. And for the men who put themselves in that greatest jeopardy and who really truly for and rightfully believed that you were facing prison and bad time and hard time, I just still, it just gets me right in the gut. And I just want to say that. I just want to say that it's still, all these years later, just hits me in the deepest part of me.
Me too.
And I'd say that given that the time that it's coming out now, the impact it had on us as young people, I think is really important. And we're talking about it when we were in our 20s, maybe 30s, but not that. But for a lot of us, it changed our lives. We didn't go on the kind of directory that we were trained to do, or we were raised to do, or put through college and, you know, get a job and so forth. It was a break, not only with, you know, conscription, but really with social values. What David says, it's evil. When you learn evil, you don't go back. You know, you don't embrace it later. So it really was an important part of my life in terms of changing the future. And that's what I hope is going to go on today with the younger people who are making big decisions now at a young age, you know, and let's see where that can take them.
I just want to say something about all of you, which is that the reunion which started this was, it wasn't like everybody went, just as Bob said, people didn't go back. Bob spent his life publishing books about power and the people and women's suffrage and, you know, that really amazing range of books of empowering people. Bob Zhou's been involved in printing and, you know, has done some amazing stuff related to the movement. Steve Ladd's been distributing films on peace for the last, I don't know how long, a long time. Winter's a labor lawyer, a lawyer who represents disenfranchised people. David's been publishing important stuff on these subjects ever since that period. So, I mean, everyone at that reunion, hardly anyone had gone back to the life that they had planned before this happened. And it's, you know, it's not just about that moment, but it's about the trajectory of people's lives that followed.
Keepers of the flame.
Yes. And I think the same thing will happen with this generation, but I'm really curious. We're not going to see that, but I'm really curious to see.
You know, part of what we were here for is because we're old and we have memories of history that needs to be known and preserved. And we were in danger of forgetting just what we did so many years ago back in the high grass. And that would be a shame for American democracy if we didn't learn anything from what we did and we forgot about it. Mm-hmm. There are three things to remember. The war was evil. We were all responsible for it. And it stopped because a citizen movement rose up and forced the government to change its policy for the only time in American history. We need this memory.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important too, because me watching it, I obviously didn't live through that war and all that. So all I've ever heard was just, you know, kind of the talking points of it. And I obviously knew how horrific it was and all of that, but I didn't know the backstory of the resistance to the draft and all of that. So, you know, even just like you were saying, like moving that forward and giving it to that story to another generation and everything, I think is really cool. And I'm just curious what were your initial goals with making this movie and how has the response been? Like what has kind of transpired from it?
I'd like to speak for a minute here. As this movie was finishing up, Ken Burns released his 18-hour documentary on Vietnam. And I watched it and he never mentioned the resistance or draft resistance. I watched it again in case I missed it. Wasn't there. So I went to LMU and I asked to speak in class, and I don't like speaking in class. One of the first things I learned was these people don't even know there was a war. They literally do not know. Class of 25, how many are aware of Vietnam? One person raised their hand.
Wow.
And so I go in as Joe Ordinary. I say I'm here as Joe Ordinary. I need to tell you that ordinary people, because I am one of them, can have an effect on social change. And then I explained to them about the draft resistance. I talked to them about what David said 50 years ago, that we all have a constituency and people watch what we do. So I talk about that. I explain that, I'm not a leader, but I had an effect on social change. And the proof of it is that they're not sitting there in the classroom needing to clutch onto a 2S to stay out of a body bag in Afghanistan. And it has a big effect on them. Actually, I speak in class and I get these cards back from the class, notes from the people. It's pretty emotional, but I was shocked to find out that nobody knew about this war. And it's the most important event in my life.
Maybe in the country's life, at least it's recent life.
Mm.
Yeah, nobody interesting, as you've said. So many people don't know about this war. And certainly they don't know about the fact that this was the largest refusal to fight a war in American history and had an enormous impact on the government and the war itself, obviously, too. And on our lives, as has been said, it really, I think, changed all of us in many ways. And we realized also the power of non-cooperation with evil or wrong, which David says eloquently in the film, talks about that. And that, I think, is at the core of the resistance, is you have the ability to refuse to cooperate with what you consider to be wrong or evil. And individually and then collectively, that can make a huge difference, as we saw during the war and as we're seeing more currently. And actually, today in other countries like Myanmar, Burma, the level of civil disobedience and non-cooperation with the military government there is truly inspiring.
Russia, too.
Yeah. So it can be done, it can be organized on a mass level, and we can affect change. That's the inspiration of this film.
The timing for this film was something we didn't plan. This took a very long, almost embarrassingly long time to make, but it came out at just the right time, because it did. We were able to sort of make the final scenes, the Black Lives Matter movement and other movements that are contemporary and haven't happened in the meantime. So, it was really felt like this was a ripe earth to plant this film in this moment. Really.
And for our movement to work, it required people who were willing to ante up, who were willing to pay the price that it would take to get the country's attention.
Yeah.
That meant for me 20 months in prison, 4 of those in punishment cell blocks. And for everybody who went, nobody went into prison for less than a year, and some were in for as many as 5. And let's understand that it begins with that individual human decision that to be the person you need to be, you cannot go along with this.
I just wanted to say something about the beginnings of this film, because it was started by Christopher Colorado Jones, who was a resistor himself. And it started with a 8 millimeter film that he had shot in prison, and it sort of expanded from there. But he very tragically died in 2019 in an accident, and so we lost him. We never got to see the complete finished film, to see the response it's gotten, which was a lot more than I expected. I mean, I think the timing really is good for this film. It's getting a lot of attention and a lot of good energy out there. But anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge Christopher's
Yes.
launch of this. It was his idea, and he dragged me into it, and I said, I think there's a film here, after doing these interviews at this reunion, and he said, yeah, good, let's do it. And and then we took a long time. We had to raise a lot of money and get a lot of people involved, but it was, it's been well worth it. And I'm really thrilled that it's out there now.
I want to make another point too. Just as I kind of alluded to before, here I am, a woman in draft resistance. Perhaps a little bit of an odd fit, but had I kind of gone, oh, I'm not doing that. The draft doesn't affect me. I'm not a, they were draft women. It's not my thing. Women in the LA resistance were extremely effective, and we did everything and were instrumental to LA resistance. And I think about the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think about, had that movement said or discouraged people of other races to participate, how much less that movement would have been. And in fact, they welcomed, as they term allies, they welcome allies of other races because everybody was needed, everybody was wanted because there's strength in numbers. With draft resistance, everybody was needed, everybody was wanted. The families of resistance, the brothers, the sisters, the mothers, clergy person, everybody was needed. So today, if people hesitate, well, maybe I don't fit in, maybe I'm not the right person, maybe I wouldn't be welcome. Don't hesitate. I mean, don't be insensitive, don't be aggressive, but don't stop yourself, don't limit yourself. You know, go with your best instincts. And the point is to engage. The point isn't to try to talk yourself out of not engaging.
And the point was that people change their minds. It's one of the wonderful things about human beings. We all started out for the war and we all changed, which meant that there were always people out there who could go through the exact same process. And as a movement, we led with an open door and kept that door open. We didn't, you didn't draw a line in the sand and say you're with us or against us. We instead opened the door and said, join us. Join us. We want everybody. We want the cops. We want the soldiers. We want everybody with a heart to join us. And I think our faith that humanity would respond was redeemed in the outcome of this story.
Winter, you made me think about, I've taken some criticism over the last many years, because this is my third film about old guys who refuse to fight. So, I mean, it's like, it's like, do I only make film about men? And do I only make film about pacifist men? And I'm afraid I am guilty of that in my last 3 films. So although Ellsberg's not a pacifist exactly, but a resistor against the war. But I think sometimes we need to tell each other stories that aren't our stories, and we need to help other people who are doing the things we resonate with that aren't, you know, that we don't have to suffer those ills, but we commiserate and empathize and help others.
As having spent almost 50 years as a national and international journalist, I can tell you it doesn't have to be your story to tell it.
Of course.
You have to tell it well and truly. That's how cultures work.
Of course, yes. It's true.
I learned that from the women's suffrage movement too. And I came to that movement out of the peace movement. So I understood what they were doing. And a lot of historians and people who study that kind of movement didn't seem to have a clue. Like, what did women want? Well, Congress gave them the right to vote. That was pretty much the narrative at the time. So as Winter was spending time with the boys, I've been spending time with the girls. But they're universal stories. You know, it's about democracy. It's about people standing up. It's about taking just that first step and being inspired and inspiring others. It's a narrative that happens over and over again. The civil rights movement, the labor movement, you know, the anti-war movements in the past. These are part of our history, and they give us strength, and they inspire us, and they teach us. So that, to me, that's why this film is so important, and what it implies. It encourages people to go study more, I think, and find out, who are these people? Read David's books. They're going to get to you. They're very, very wonderful. And see Judith's films, her other films are very, very instructive and informative. So I hope this is a stepping off point for the people who see this movie and go further. Go see some more movies. and pick up a book and think more about what this film is all about.
And carry that history forward.
Yeah, that's it.
Not going to be able to carry it much longer. You know, the wheels are starting to fall off for all of us. But that doesn't mean somebody out there whose wheels still work well can't pick it up and run with it. So do, please.
Yeah, we're in the first group that got vaccinated. That tells you how old we are.
Bob mentioned taking the first step he's talking about. What I tell the college students is that, you know, we're all held in place by fear. They'll pass a law or they'll do something socially like, you know, the football player that got down on his knees. So they stop you in your tracks. And for me, there's no social change until you take a step beyond that line that's held you back before. There will never be any social change. If you're just on Facebook, if you take that step, with me, it was not taking a 2S. It wasn't turning it in, it was not taking it. And then I took the next step. I turn in a draft card. And then you take a next step, and pretty soon you're non-cooperating. And it's a lesson for other people behind you. And there's one in the film. You get to see Randy Keeler talking with Daniel Ellsberg. And there's an example of constituency. Ellsberg coming to Keeler to find out, what did you do? Why did you do it? And what can I do that's like that? And as a result, we have the Pentagon Papers. The lesson of constituency that David talked about then and now is one of the biggest lessons for me. I pass it on every time I talk.
It's an empowerment. By what we do, we make it possible for other people to do likewise. And that was always our rule as an organization. Nobody goes out advocating people commit civil disobedience against the selective service system if they aren't themselves in a position of jeopardy.
You're always crystal clear, David.
Act first. In case you missed it, we all have a certain kind of bond, having been through all of this together some 50
We
years,
do.
that will never diminish.
Yeah.
Nope.
I think it's
Never.
so cool that this film exists now, and it'll forever be something that can be shown to future generations, and to just keep the story moving forward and to educate. And I think that's the power of movies, especially, you know, independent cinema and stuff. It's you are able to just tell stories, and stories that are important and do matter, and kind of move us all forward. So thank you guys for
May I say one
movie.
last thing? May I
Yes,
say one last thing?
absolutely.
One of the things that I just want to emphasize is the underpinning of this group is nonviolence. That what we did, what the resistance did, whether LA resistance, Palo Alto, whatever, what we did, it was nonviolent. It was strong. It was determined. Absolutely. But at every step of the way, it was nonviolent. And I'm seeing a lot of films this year, a lot of very highly praised, critically praised films, very tough to watch, about activism back in the day, and very, very violent, how people responded. And I can understand it, but it's very violent, and guess who always wins? It's the oppressor. And I thank my lucky stars that nonviolence won me, that resistance was nonviolent. And not only does this kind of activism have to be always forward and embraced here now and forever, but not in a nonviolent, because it's nonviolence in the end that is the stronger and more resilient option.
Can I just say one quick thing at the end here, Grace,
Absolutely.
is that we, I don't know where Steve went, but Steve's been running our website and helping to organize the impact campaign that's about to come out. And we have already, with one one screening in the US, we got 50 organizations, a lot of Extinction Rebellion, mostly, almost all young people, not almost all, but many young organizations of resistors who want to use the film in their work. So we're already seeing that there's a great interest in this story among the next generation of people who are
Good.
doing what we did.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Satisfying. Good.
Well, do you guys have any final comments just about maybe last comments or what our audience watching can take away, or other websites they can go to get more information or anything?
I guess Waging Nonviolence would be the logical website to suggest people visit. And The Boys Who Said No has a wonderful website with some links on it. And inevitably, links lead you to other links. There's also the Vietnam War commemoration. I forget the name of it exactly. Association of Other Vets. Bob knows.
And I'd love it if people go and see my earlier film, which is about Daniel Ellsberg. It's called The Most Dangerous Man in America. And the website for that is www.themostdangerousmaninamerica.
Perfect. Awesome.
And the film that was done of the World War II COs.
Yeah,
Vietnam
that
wasn't
one
the
too,
only,
of course. The earlier one's called The Good War and Those Who Refuse to Fight It.
which sits right in with The Boys Who Said No.
And David.
My
yeah,
Country
yeah, get it.
vis-a-vis in your local bookstore as we speak.
Yeah, great cover, David. I
Yeah.
haven't had to get it here yet, but it's great. It looks lovely.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for making the movie, for joining this Q&A, and just being willing to kind of talk about it a little bit more in depth and raw with us. So I really appreciate it. And I know our audience is going to appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grace.
Festival.
Good to see you all.
Onward and upward, guys. Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.